What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of China Update, where I try and help you guys keep on top of the world's #2 economy. My name is Tony. For those of you watching for the first time, I work in China in an executive role. I'm a lawyer by training, but I'm trained in Chinese foreign policy. My job requires that I follow the big macro developments coming out of this country. I originally started putting these videos back together for my mates back home who were interested in China, and I wanted to give them a decent framework so they could understand what the hell was going on here. Everything I produce on here, I write myself, I film myself, I upload myself, and everything I say here, I would be comfortable saying to a paying client who wanted my opinion on a geopolitical development or a policy or an economic development here in the Middle Kingdom. If that is something that you are interested in, maybe consider subscribing. For everybody else, welcome to another episode. I hope you guys are doing well. It was a long episode last week, almost 30 minutes. I'm sorry if it was too long for some of you guys. I'll try and make this one a little bit shorter. You might have noticed that the last episode was also very international heavy. About half the episode was looking at China-US and how we got to the place we are now. Some updates in that relationship, as well as other diplomatic disputes the People's Republic is having at the moment. And we also did a bit of a deep dive into Hong Kong. This week, I'm going to focus more on internal political developments. The big informal leadership conference that I told you guys about a few weeks ago, 北戴河, is well and truly over. The top leaders, they're in different parts of the country. We're going to talk about what they're doing shortly. This episode is going to focus mainly on domestic political and ideological developments, as well as a couple of international stories that deal with China as well. So there's going to be a bigger one on Hong Kong next week and probably on China-US next week, because it was a big one last week. This week is going to be a bit more focused on the domestic situation. But before we jump in, it is a massive help, as always, as a new YouTuber and a YouTuber that somehow has not made the algorithm very happy. It does not like content uploaded in China, nor does it like content that discusses China, which I find incredibly strange that YouTube doesn't like people talking about China. But the algorithm does not like this channel, but you can really make a big difference if you smash that like button, comment, share if you enjoy it. It's a huge help. And of course, the link to my Patreon, which I recently set up, is below for anyone who does want to try and ensure that this is 100% fan supported and is financially sustainable. A big shout out to Mike and Nathan and Andrew and others for your support. It is incredible. But all of that said, if you enjoy the video, a like is all the support I really need. So thank you in advance. Now, let's jump into this week's China update. This week, General Secretary Xi Jinping undertook an inspection tour of Anhui province in eastern China, the first official event since the annual informal leadership meeting in 北戴河 concluded. Like any good politician, he made sure to speak to victims of the recent floods in that part of the country, in particularly hard areas, and spoke about all the great work that the government is doing in its flood alleviation work. Now, while we're on this theme, serious flooding continues into this week. On Monday, the Ministry of Water Resources said that 38 tributaries on the upper reaches of the Yangtze are now above warning levels, with 19, quote, dangerously above, end quote, warning levels. The Tianyi River, a major upper Yangtze tributary, burst its banks later that day. The beautiful southwestern province of Sichuan, for the first time ever, has now raised its flood emergency score to its highest level. Over 30 inches of rain has fallen over the Yangtze, in Chinese the Changjiang, or the Long River basin since the start of June, the most in over 60 years. On Thursday, the Ministry of Water Resources also announced that the inbound flow of water into the Three Gorges Reservoir reached more than 94,000 cubic meters per second, the highest level in the history of the world's largest dam. The dam was built to withstand a water level of 175 meters, and officials expect the water level to reach 165 meters over the weekend. A joint working paper between China's prestigious Tsinghua University and Harvard University in the United States earlier this week warns that China's housing boom may have hit a, quote, precarious peak, end quote. The paper argues that household income and demographic growth that supported the decades-long housing boom have slowed and will continue to decline going forward. Because real estate and its related industries contribute to about 30% of China's GDP, according to the authors, even a slight decline in housing growth can have a big impact on national economic performance. The authors say, quote, "We find that a 20% fall in real estate activity could lead to a 5 to 10% fall in GDP, even without amplification from a banking crisis or accounting for the importance of real estate as collateral," end quote. Now, while we're on the theme of reports that bear bad news, the Beijing-based government think tank, the Rural Development Institute of the China Academy of Social Sciences, CAS for short, those of you who don't know, CAS is a pretty big deal, published a report estimating that due to, quote, "increasing urbanization and an aging rural workforce," end quote, China should expect a, quote, "grain supply gap of 130 million tons by 2025. The report, end quote. The report suggests that China should improve its grain storage to mitigate against future food price fluctuations, and concludes that China will increasingly have to rely on foreign imports in order to feed its massive aging population. At the Democratic Convention in the United States this week, the team for presidential nominee Joe Biden released a statement detailing its China platform. US analysts more or less agree that its assessment of China is more or less consistent with the Republicans' critical assessment, seeing the Middle Kingdom under the current administration, the Xi Jinping administration, as a risk and a rival to the United States. It calls for a united front with allies to, quote, "respond to aggression," end quote. Respected China watcher Bill Bishop points out that the Democratic platform in 2016, 4 years ago, when discussing the question of Taiwan, said the following, quote, "We are committed to a One China policy and the Taiwan Relations Act, and will continue to support a peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues that is consistent with the wishes and best interests of the people of Taiwan," end quote. Whereas this year in the 2020 China policy platform, the language reads, quote, "Democrats are committed to the Taiwan Relations Act and will continue to support blah, blah, blah." The rest of that is the same. So a commitment to the One China or a One China policy has been removed from the Democratic platform on the question of Taiwan. What this means in practice is still unclear, but it certainly is an interesting development, particularly if the Democratic nominee is voted into the White House later this year. Politburo member and top foreign policy official, even higher than the Minister of Foreign Affairs Wang Yi, Yang Jiechi, will hold talks this weekend in South Korea with So-hon, the South Korean National Security Advisor. On Thursday, Mr. Yang also visited Singapore to discuss regional security matters. This week, the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China estimated that around 250,000 or 250,000 foreign professionals normally based in China remain stranded outside the People's Republic of China and have been unable to return for several months. I personally know several of these foreign professionals who are stuck overseas and cannot get back. Some of you may know, we discussed this at the time, in around February, March, China shut its borders basically to all foreigners, even those of us who have study and work visas. I was actually already in the country. I just returned. I returned in late February. Everyone said I was crazy, and I think I was a little bit crazy, but I just decided to come back. When the virus first hit in China, it was around Chinese New Year, some of you may remember, and so many foreigners who were based, professional foreigners that were based in China, went overseas on vacation. Then the virus blew up within China. It was too dangerous to come back to China. And then in March, China shut its borders to foreigners. And so many are now still stuck outside of the country. Some are beginning to find ways to get back, but there are still many that are stranded overseas. This number, this 250,000, includes many professionals in important positions like entrepreneurs and executives, with over 1,000 US executives and business owners normally based in Shanghai alone, stuck overseas. In an incredible step, for the very first time ever, elite US universities or colleges in the US will be taking precautions to protect students of courses taught on US soil from being prosecuted for the application of the new national security law passed for Hong Kong. The Wall Street Journal reports, quote, "Classes at some elite universities will carry a warning label this fall. This course may cover material considered politically sensitive by China, and schools are weighing measures to try and shield students and faculty from prosecution by Chinese authorities." Went on to say, quote, "At Princeton University, students in a Chinese politics class will use codes instead of names on their work to protect their identities. Harvard Business School may excuse students from discussing politically sensitive topics if they are worried about the risks." End quote. According to new research by Bank of America, the cost for US and European companies to move manufacturing out of China could reach $1 trillion over 5 years. This is in the context of Beijing currently in the midst of an aggressive campaign of carrots and sticks to convince big American and European Union businesses and firms to stay in China. In the latest annual RMB Internationalization report published by the People's Bank of China last Friday, China seeks to further expand access to foreign investors who use the yuan, the RMB, to invest in Chinese bonds and stocks. The report said that the RMB's share of the foreign exchange market rose modestly to 4.3% in 2019. Also on this theme, new data from the Bank of Russia shows that in the first quarter of 2020, the dollar's share of trade between Russia and China fell below 50% for the first time on record. Russia now receives more euros than dollars for its exports to China, with the share of goods purchased in euros rising from 1.3% in the second quarter of 2018 to nearly 51% at the end of quarter one this year, 2020. But while the usage of US dollars has declined relative to other currencies, it has been increasingly replaced by euros, not RMB or the Chinese RMB. In a further escalation in the Sino-Australian diplomatic dispute, China announced this week that it would be implementing anti-dumping tariffs on Australian wine imports. China is the largest market for Australian wine exporters, accounting for 40% of China's $3 billion export market last year. Okay, now let's talk about Marxism, or the revival of Marxism. The latest issue of the authoritative 九事 or Seeking Truth journal published a speech on Marxist political economy that General Secretary Xi Jinping gave to a Politburo study session about 5 years ago. In the speech, Xi Jinping argues that Marxism is still as relevant as ever and points to the widening wealth and income gap in the West as evidencing this fact. As a side note, according to both official Chinese data as well as academic estimations, China's Gini coefficient, which measures income disparity or income inequality, is higher than all Western countries, including the United States, and its rate of increase, the speed in which that inequality is exacerbating or widening, is faster than the United States. Quote, "In the face of an extremely complex economic situation at home and abroad, as well as varied political phenomena, studying the basic tenets and methodology of Marxist political economy is conducive to mastering a scientific approach for analysis of the economy." End quote. Xi Jinping argues that Marxist economic theory dictates that China should continue supporting state-owned enterprises, the state-owned sector, in order to narrow the wealth gap. The publishing of this speech years after it was made at this time signals several important things. One, Xi Jinping may indeed be a full-blown Marxist. Two, China may indeed be turning back to a state-dominated economic model. Of course, we've been discussing this idea on here for months, basically all year. Three, Xi's administration may not only see their economic model as an alternative to the capitalist models of most of the West and developed countries, but may indeed see their model as superior to that capitalist model. It could well be that the speech was published now to get officials behind the dual circulation policy direction, economic growth model, direction, new economic model, however you want to call it, that we talked about in last week's episode. If you guys are interested in looking at this new economic idea, you can check out last week's episode by clicking up here. Now, this new model would necessitate a greater role for state-owned enterprises, which may be why we are seeing these old speeches that seem to champion a Marxist political economy interpretation and analysis of China's current growth model. On Monday, the US Department of Commerce introduced measures to further restrict Huawei's access to US technology. Quote, the Bureau of Industry and Security in the Department of Commerce today further restricted access by Huawei Technologies and its non-US affiliates on the entry list to items produced domestically and abroad from US technology and software. End quote. What was key to the measures was the Commerce Department's expansion of its foreign direct product rule, which seeks to prevent Huawei from circumventing US law through alternative chip production and provision of off-the-shelf OTS chips produced with tools acquired from the United States, that is going through third parties to get American software or American fabrication equipment. The US administration will also add 38 Huawei affiliates in 36 countries to the government's economic blacklist, raising the total to 152 affiliates since Huawei was first added in May of 2019. In a recent statement, Huawei said it is fast running out of the chips it needs to make phones. This latest US move may indeed be the final nail in the coffin for the controversial telecommunications company based in China. A technology analyst in Beijing-based research firm Dragonomics called the latest US rules a quote-unquote death sentence for Huawei. Chinese state-run media responded to the US moves by threatening countermeasures that target US firms like Apple and Boeing. However, as at the filming of this, Beijing's response so far has only been rhetorical, only using language, and no hard policy has been announced, though of course this could change. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said to reporters that the intention of the United States is to oppress Huawei and other Chinese high-tech firms, and, quote, Canada is its accomplice. Here referring to the Canadian arrest of Huawei CFO Ms. Meng, who is currently awaiting trial for extradition to the United States in Canada. Zhao Lijian continued, quote, this is not only China's view, but is also a conclusion shared by the rest of the international community, including insightful people in the United States and Canada, end quote. Now, the Jerusalem Post reported on an incredible statement that was made by a journalist with the state-run China Daily. Now, this is just a tweet from one state-run media journalist. This is not an official statement of any kind, nor is it necessarily representative of anything, but I'm including it here just to give you an idea of just how tone deaf some of these propagandists are. Over the weekend, Chen Weihua, a journalist with the China Daily, responded to news that Israel would be excluding Huawei from its 5G infrastructure by calling Israeli Jews ungrateful American dogs. Quote, Chinese cities like Shanghai provided safe haven to some 30,000 Jews fleeing Nazi Europe during World War II, but now Israel returns the favor by being a US poodle against China in 5G. End quote. Huang Xiaohuai is a senior researcher at the CCP Central Party School, an institution that develops the ideology to be disseminated to mid and low tier Chinese Communist Party members. It basically designs what CCP members are supposed to believe. Think of these researchers as the theologians of the medieval Catholic Church. Recently, Jude Blanquette of the CSIS produced a wonderful translation of an important document that was produced by Huang about 18 months ago. Reading it again in English, I thought this is a wonderful opportunity to look at a few points here on this video. Under Xi Jinping, there has been a revival of ideological work that his party members are actually studying and reflecting on party orthodoxy again. So we really need to look at what exactly that orthodoxy is, and so this piece is a good opportunity to look at some of that. These documents are incredibly long-winded. I must paraphrase parts of this just for brevity's sake, if anything else. But I've been very careful to ensure that when I do that, I have not changed any of the meaning that was intended in the full paragraph itself. And I've made sure not to twist any parts to change the meaning from what was originally intended. I will include the essay as a PDF below for anyone who wants to see the full paragraphs or the full essay in its entirety. But here are some parts from that essay that are worth reflecting on here when we think about the ideology that the party wants its members, particularly those in middle management that implement these policies every day. This is the ideology that the party wants its members to believe. Quote, "Developing the socialist market economy helps to liberate and develop the society's productive forces, strengthen the country's overall national power, and increase the people's living standards, further bringing out socialism's superiority." And socialism, collectivism, and patriotism are coming under new challenges. Money worship, hedonism, and extreme individualism have grown and spread to a certain extent. Behavioral phenomena such as moral failure, indecency, and vulgarity of all kinds repeatedly breach the minimum standards of public order and decency, generating negative effects on the promotion of the mainstream thinking, ethics, and values of the society. And profound changes are taking place in the media situation, the public opinion ecosystem. The dominant role of mainstream media has suffered a huge blow, and the internet frequently becomes a source and amplifier for fomenting negative public opinion and spreading false ideas, greatly increasing the difficulty of guiding public opinion and controlling content. To firmly maintain internet ideology dominance is to protect the sovereignty and authority of the state. And looking at what some of the countries have encountered, new media played a role in the color revolutions that cannot be ignored. In the color revolutions, the mainstream media in those countries fundamentally lost the ability to lead. People found it hard to hear the authoritative voices of their governments, leaving the populations thinking confused and disoriented. So-called independent media used a variety of means to vilify the ruling authorities and incite popular discontent. Various hostile forces are tightening their pervasive containment of China. We shall insist on the leadership of the CCP and insist on the socialist system. The closer we get to the goal of national rejuvenation, the closer we get to the center of the world stage. And the various kinds of pervasive containment facing China's path, theory, system, and culture will not stop. End quote. Okay guys, that's our China update for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate the support from you guys. Throw your comments below. I always love to chat with you guys. And don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the episode. I will see you guys next time on China Update.